every single American should be grateful for the men and women who carried out Operation Midnight Hammer. Because of their efforts, a ceasefire has already been reached between Israel and a much weaker Iran. This is what peace through strength looks like, and only the U.S. military under President Trump's leadership could accomplish this feat.
That was Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican of Tennessee, June 25th, 2025. And here's Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a few days earlier.
President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength.
Peace through strength. After the U.S. strike on Iran's nuclear facilities in June, there were many such mentions of President Trump and peace through strength. In this episode of C-SPAN's podcast, The Weekly, we remember another president closely associated with the doctrine of peace through strength. And we do so by hearing about a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier named after that president. The official motto of the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan, peace through strength.
Around the world, he burnished America's lamp of liberty so that those living in tyranny might secure freedom against the darkness. His steadfast belief in peace through strength consigned imperial communism to the ash heap of history.
January 13th, 1993, the East Room of the White House. With that citation, President George H.W. Bush presented the Presidential Medal of Freedom to President Ronald Reagan. President Reagan often quoted George Washington's maxim that to be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving the peace. And the foundation of President Reagan's own foreign policy was peace through strength. Here's Ronald Reagan accepting his party's presidential nomination at the 1980 Republican National Convention in Detroit.
We're not a warlike people, quite the opposite. We always seek to live in peace. We resort to force infrequently and with great reluctance and only after we've determined that it's absolutely necessary. We are awed, and rightly so, by the forces of destruction at loose in the world in this nuclear era. But neither can we be naive or foolish. 4 times in my lifetime, America has gone to war, bleeding the lives of its young men into the sands of island beachheads, the fields of Europe, and the jungles and rice paddies of Asia. We know only too well that war comes not when the forces of freedom are strong. It is when they are weak that tyrants are tempted. We simply cannot learn these lessons the hard way again without risking our destruction.
As president, Ronald Reagan authorized the construction of 4 Nimitz-class aircraft carriers, the Abraham Lincoln, the George Washington, the John C. Stennis, and the Harry S. Truman. Construction on the 9th Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier began on February 12, 1988. President Clinton approved naming that carrier after Ronald Reagan on February 2, 1995, a few days before Reagan's 84th birthday. President Clinton said in a statement, "I find it most fitting to name CVN-76 in honor of President Ronald Reagan, an American leader unsurpassed in his boundless patriotism and love for the armed forces, and someone who still inspires us with his courage and grace." A week earlier, President Clinton mentioned Ronald Reagan in his State of the Union address.
And to Ronald Reagan, whom we wish well tonight, and who exhorted us to carry on until the twilight struggle against communism was won.
Peace through strength was adopted as the official motto of the USS Ronald Reagan. The ship was christened on March 4, 2001 in Newport News, Virginia. Among the ceremony speakers who cited President Reagan and peace through strength, President George W. Bush.
Some achievements fade with the years. Ronald Reagan's achievements grow larger with the passing of time. He had a profound vision of America's role in the world as one of peace through strength. And because of Ronald Reagan, the world saw America as a strong and peaceful nation.
Both senators from Virginia spoke at that christening. They were both Republicans, and they both cited Ronald Reagan for peace through strength. Here's George Allen.
Those of us who stand here in the shadow of this symbol of America's military might are reminded of President Reagan and his ardent and wise promotion of peace through strength.
And here's John Warner.
As this ship sails the world and enters the ports, and people look at the name, they will remember Ronald Reagan's quest for freedom when he made that historic statement, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall." Peace through strength brought that wall down. Just as President Reagan will always be remembered for strengthening America's military, so has President Bush committed to do the same.
2 years later, on July 12, 2003, at Norfolk Naval Station, the USS Ronald Reagan was commissioned. It was the first time a Navy ship was commissioned to a living president. Here's Commanding Officer of the USS Ronald Reagan, Captain J.W. Goodwin.
When leaving office in 1988, President Reagan viewed with satisfaction the effects of what his supporters had dubbed the Reagan Revolution. In his farewell address to the nation, he proclaimed, "We've done our part." As I walk into the city streets, a word to the men and women across America who for 8 years did the work that brought America back. My friends, we did it. We weren't just marking time. We made a difference. We made a city stronger, we made a city freer, and we left her in good hands. All in all, not bad at all. Well, shipmates, as I walk through this great ship, I feel the same way. We did it. We weren't just marking time. We made a difference. We've made our Navy and indeed our nation stronger. We will continue to keep our world free by holding true to our motto, peace through strength.
Also speaking at the commissioning, Vice President Dick Cheney.
More than 2 decades ago, President Reagan made his first voyage to an aircraft carrier, the USS Constellation. He called that ship a powerful force in an uncertain world. And a generation later, we can say that of the ship that we've now named for him. Last month, the Constellation returned home from its final deployment in the Arabian Gulf, where it served as the night carrier throughout Operation Iraqi Freedom. The Constellation will now be replaced by the Ronald Reagan, which, in its own time, will know its share of heavy winds and rough seas. But in the lifetime of this carrier, as in the lifetime of its namesake, enemies of freedom will fall away, and the realm of freedom will expand further across the face of the earth.
On February 6, 2011, in Simi Valley, California, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation celebrated what would have been President Reagan's 100th birthday. The event included a 4-jet Black Knights flyover right off the deck of the USS Ronald Reagan.
From the men and women proudly serving aboard the USS Ronald Reagan, and for all the sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines of the United States Armed Forces standing on the front lines of freedom around the world. Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Flying one of those 4 jets was a former Reagan Foundation staffer. To bolster U.S. forces in the Eastern Pacific region and counter Chinese naval expansion, from 2015 to 2024, the USS Ronald Reagan was home-ported in Yokosuka, Japan. That's where, on April 18, 2017, Vice President Mike Pence addressed the sailors and cited peace through strength.
You know, we're standing on a ship named after my second favorite president. Our 40th president, Ronald Reagan, was a great president who powerfully reminded us that peace only comes through strength. You are that strength.
President Donald Trump has his own association with the USS Ronald Reagan. On November 22nd, 2018, Thanksgiving, President Trump spoke by conference call to U.S. service members across the world, including those aboard the USS Ronald Reagan.
Happy Thanksgiving as well to Captain Pat Hannifin and all of the sailors aboard the USS Ronald Reagan. Great ship. Your ship's motto is one that we embrace every day: peace through strength. That's what the motto is, and we have that motto at home. Everywhere the 7th Fleet sails, the USS Ronald Reagan is an enduring symbol of American might, American strength, American power, and really American goodness in so many ways.
And here's Captain Hannifin, commanding officer of the USS Ronald Reagan.
From the U.S. Navy, we have the commanding officer, Captain Pat Hannifin. And Pat, are you on the phone?
Yes, sir, I'm with you. And from the over 4,800 sailors and airmen aboard USS Ronald Reagan, the nation's only permanently forward deployed aircraft carrier. We are currently in Victoria Harbor, Hong Kong, about 13 hours ahead of you. Still Thanksgiving here. And from all the sailors aboard Reagan, serving strength for America in the Indo-Pacific. We wish you a happy Thanksgiving.
Well, that's great, Pat. I appreciate it very much, and say hello to everybody, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Finally, we end with a clip of Nancy Reagan. Actually, two of them. Ronald Reagan's wife attended both the christening and the commissioning of the USS Ronald Reagan. She broke a bottle of champagne across the ship's bow at the christening on March 4th, 2001, which also was the day of her and Ronald Reagan's 49th wedding anniversary.
I christen thee.
We'll give you some room.
I christen thee, the United States ship Ronald Reagan, and God bless all those who sail on her.
And 2 years later, the commissioning of the USS Ronald Reagan, July 12, 2003. Nancy Reagan was the ship's sponsor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I only have one line, so man the ship and bring her alive.
Aye, ma'am! All right, here they come, and we're going to stand right here.
Ronald Reagan often said, "My life really began when I met Nancy." And the life of the ship named for President Reagan began with Nancy Reagan. On July 12, 2003, she made the ship come alive. Ronald Reagan died less than a year later, June 5, 2004. Nancy Reagan died March 6, 2016. Ronald Reagan was 93. Nancy Reagan was 94. As for the USS Ronald Reagan, it's currently at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Bremerton, Washington. The aircraft carrier went into a 17-month maintenance at the shipyard in March 2025. And now, a bonus clip. The USS Ronald Reagan is now one of 10 ships in the Nimitz class of nuclear-powered aircraft carriers in service with the U.S. Navy. The 10th and last of the class, the USS George H.W. Bush, was commissioned in January 2009. The lead ship of its class is the USS Nimitz. Commissioned in 1975, the USS Nimitz is now the oldest U.S. aircraft carrier in service and the oldest serving aircraft carrier in the world. And during his final presidential campaign debate with Walter Mondale, October 21, 1984, Ronald Reagan mentioned the USS Nimitz.
Yes, I'm not going to continue trying to respond to these repetitions of the falsehoods that have already been stated here. But with regard to whether Mr. Mondale would be strong as he said he would be, I know that he has a commercial out where he is appearing on the deck of the Nimitz and watching the F-14s take off, and that's an image of strength. Except that if he had had his way when the Nimitz was being planned, he would have been deep in the water out there because there wouldn't have been any Nimitz to stand on. He was against it.
That's it for this episode of C-SPAN's The Weekly. There's a lot more to learn about the USS Ronald Reagan in the C-SPAN video library, including the time C-SPAN cameras went aboard the ship for a behind-the-scenes tour. And you can also find many times President Reagan using his famous phrase, peace through strength. For now, thanks for listening, happy searching, and for our closing music, we'll hear what was played immediately after Nancy Reagan made the USS Ronald Reagan come alive. Anchors Away.
Here they come, and we're going to stand right here and watch. Would you like to?